guided by divine purpose, others championed freedom of conscience and inquiry. Some embraced an Anglo-Saxon Protestant identity, others ethnic and religious pluralism. Some valued equality and democratic participation, others a deference to traditional aristocratic order. All of them continue to champion some version of their founding ideals in the present day. The United States had founding fathers, to be sure, but they were the grandfathers, great-grandfathers, or great-great-grandfathers of the men who met to sign our Declaration of Independence and to draft our first two constitutions. Our true founders didn't have an original intent we can refer back to in challenging times. They had original intents. America's most essential and abiding divisions are not between red states and blue states, conservatives and liberals, capital and labor, blacks and whites, the faithful and the secular. Rather, our divisions stem from this fact. The United States is a federation comprised of the whole or part of 11 regional nations, some of which truly do not see eye to eye with one another. These nations respect neither state nor international boundaries, bleeding over the U.S. frontiers with Canada and Mexico as readily as they divide California, Texas, Illinois, or Pennsylvania. 6 joined together to liberate themselves from British rule. 4 were conquered but not vanquished by English-speaking rivals. 2 more were founded in the West by a mix of American frontiersmen in the second half of the 19th century. Some are defined by cultural pluralism, others by their French, Spanish, or Anglo-Saxon heritage. Few have shown any indication that they are melting into some sort of unified American culture. On the contrary, since 1960, the fault lines between these nations have been growing wider, fueling culture wars, constitutional struggles, and ever more frequent pleas for unity. I have very consciously used the term nations to describe these regional cultures, for by the time they agreed to share a federated state, each had long exhibited the characteristics of nationhood. Americans, because of this particular historical circumstance, often confuse the terms state and nation, and are among the only people in the world who use statehood and nationhood interchangeably. A state is a sovereign political entity, like the United Kingdom, Kenya, Panama, or New Zealand, eligible for membership in the United Nations and inclusion on the maps produced by Rand McNally or the National Geographic Society. A nation is a group of people who share, or believe they share, a common culture, ethnic origin, language, historical experience, artifacts, and symbols. Some nations are presently stateless, the Kurdish, Panestilian, or Quebecois nations, for instance. Some control and dominate their own nation-state, which they typically name for themselves, as in France, Germany, Japan, or Turkey. Conversely, there are plenty of states, some of them federated, that aren't dominated by a single nation, like Belgium, Switzerland, Malaysia, Canada, and indeed the United States. North America's 11 nations are all stateless, though at least 2 currently aspire to change that, and most of the others have tried to at one time or another. This is the story of the 11 nations, and it explains much about who we North Americans are, where we've come from, and where we might be going. American Nations reveals the history of North America's nations from the moment of their respective foundations to their present positions within the continent's 3 federations, Canada, Mexico, and the United States. It shows how their conflicting agendas shaped the scope and nature of the American Revolution, the Articles of the Confederation, the Constitution, and a chain of violent citizen uprisings against the early American Republic. While every American knows about the great interregional conflict that was the Civil War, it was in fact neither unprecedented — both Appalachia and New England entertained secession in the decades after the Revolution — nor strictly two-sided. The war actually involved a complicated 6-nation diplomatic minuet over the future of the West. Northern Mexicans, including those who built the culture of what is now the extreme southwest of the United States, have for centuries seen themselves as separate from their purported countrymen in central and southern Mexico. They